Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we're talking about Cruella today.
Yes.
I quite fancied the look of this.
Yes,
From the posters, the trailers. Emma Stone, I thought, really looked the part.
Yes.
Of a modern, punky Cruella de Vil.
Yes.
In a live-action Disney remake. It's what it's like. Maleficent, they're taking their villain and they're making her relatable and giving her a story. And well, spoilers will be coming up. The idea basically is in the 1960s and early 70s, you see her as a very, very young girl, like 8 years old, and she undergoes a kind of tragedy, but she's destined to be a fashion designer. And then a few years later, having encountered this tragedy, you see her as Emma Stone's age, being punky, part of a grifter gang, and she encounters the world of fashion. She finally gets into the world of fashion, where Emma Thompson is the
queen bee. She's the leading designer of her day. She is like
Devil Wears Prada. That's where I'm going.
Yeah, Anna Wintour, but also Dior or somebody, right? So she is the driving force and the leading fashion designer.
Yeah.
Who you see really is just stealing everybody else's ideas and so on, but has a kind of a genius for organization and, getting things done.
So, spoilers will be coming up. I don't think you like this.
No, it's a film that has everything that I do like, and I certainly wanted to like it, right? I mean, visually it's stunning. The clothes, are a marvel of their own. It has scenes at Liberties, in the 70s with all the wonderful prints and everything. The jewelry design is magnificent. I kept just staring at what Emma Stone had on her ears and on her wrists. The hairdos are like discussion points. So it's a film that in a way is very interesting, right? Because, often I dwell so much on the look of a film, the visuals of a film, and so on. And this is a film that has that, but I think it's really lacking pace, rhythm, wit, really. I think the tone is slightly off, right? I think Emma Stone, whom I love, but I think she was off, I hated her accent. It sounded like somebody's been telling her she's got a really good British accent, and
I liked her accent.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did. I actually Celia was just telling me she hadn't seen the film, but she thinks Emma Stone's accent sounds terrible. I really didn't. Like, it's an accent that it's very practiced, but it's also an accent of a person who is putting on a performance.
So you're saying it's deliberately false?
No, exactly. But the character is, not at the start. At the start, the character is who she is. She's Estella.
Yeah, she's a different actress.
Also when you first meet Emma Stone as Cruella, she's Estella, right? And later she develops this Cruella persona and then lets it take over her. And so when she becomes Cruella, it's this persona that she's putting on. It makes a lot of sense there. But I still found it believable when she was not being Estella. She's still someone who's portraying something about herself. I liked it.
I didn't. And I didn't like her performance. Particularly all the scenes where she was working as a cleaning lady at Liberties. I think they were really forced. It was kind of rather stodgy and witless, really. And I think some of that was her performance. She didn't have the ease and fluidity and wit. I thought Emma Thompson was a marvel, really, because she did all of those things with the lines that Emma Stone just couldn't do because she was so stuck on giving that accent, right? That actually she couldn't move in and through the language and be playful and, get a joke out of an intonation, right? The way that Emma Thompson could. And I thought what was brilliant about Emma Thompson's performance is that she did all of that. She got a laugh out of the movement of her body at one point, just the way that she went with the dogs, right? And she managed the body and the costumes and all of it really, really fluidly. But then she would do these little things where by looking at the camera in a particular way, she would get a reaction. Yeah? And it was just a very subtle thing. It was like, the way she turned her head, so that it had this particular graphic effect, through the camera. Emma Thompson was doing none of that. Emma Stone, sorry, yeah.
I disagree. I think it's a little unfair on Emma Stone. I think her role is less comic. Emma Thompson gets this outrageously snobby woman in charge. I mean, she like in a film that's about the backstory of this kind of classic Disney villain, she's the villain, Emma Thompson in this, right? She gets to be that. And I think she really leans into it, and she gives this wonderful performance, as you say. There's a really lovely line where one of her helpers or assistants or whatever has given her some bad news, I think, and she says, "You've been a great," and then there's a pause, and she says, "Help," and it's the fact she had to think about calling him, saying that he'd helped her. Really, really lovely. Emma Stone has less of that to do, but she's punk rock, right? Like in the kind of world of this film, Emma Stone has invented punk rock and brought it to London, and she's got this crazy hair, and she's scribbling shit on walls, and she's getting drunk and passing out. So she's this reckless abandon kind of thing. That's what she sells and communicates, and I think that really worked for me.
Well, I mean, the thing is, so I agree, but I disagree in the sense that Emma Stone has the lead character. And she, in fact, has the flashier role. Because whilst it's true that Emma Thompson is the villain, Emma Stone is given the opportunity of playing a dual character. Yeah, her transformation into a Cruella de Vil is really her transformation into the Emma Thompson character. So, so she gets to do both that, and punk rock queen and street girl and thief. And she's given all of these opportunities that Emma Stone is given a one-dimensional character, really. And she gets all of that from it. Right, I think Emma Thompson. Emma Stone, is allowed to do all of those different things, including the character that Emma Thompson plays. So I think it's a failure, on her part as an actress, that she doesn't extract, the juice, from all of those different elements as one expects. I mean, I think some of it is really quite forced. I dislike the accent. She's not very good with the use of her body. She's often just hunched up when she's being a maid, for example. But there was something else about...
I do get what you mean. I think it's a little unfair, but I do get what you mean. She could be doing more.
Yeah. I mean, she's a very appealing actress. She's a very appealing persona. I like her, But actually, I just don't think... I just don't think she succeeds very well with the part. And I do actually think that Emma Thompson is a measure of her failure.
Yeah. I was annoyed that they didn't kill the dogs. Because, this kind of started with Deadpool, I think, right? Deadpool was like, let's do these films that are for kids, but do it 18 rated, or in America, R rated. Which is a big deal in America, an R rating. People really try to avoid the R rating. And they were like, no, let's do it deliberately. Loads of swearing, loads of sex and all that. And it did really, really well. And then Joker did a kind of R-rated Joker movie, and they tried to make it very serious and all this. And you can kind of see a line from those into Cruella, I think, because it's trying to have that kind of more adult punky thing, but it's still Disney, ultimately. So Emma Thompson's character has got these 3 Dalmatians, and the one thing that you know about Cruella de Vil is she wants to skin some Dalmatians to make a coat. And then eventually this idea arises. They kidnap the dogs, and after they kidnap them, she thinks, oh, maybe they'll make a nice coat. And then this coat shows up, right? And I thought, oh, right, they've done it off screen. Well, fair enough. They can't show you actually slitting the throat of a dog. But they've killed the dog still. And then it turns out, no, they haven't killed the dogs, and then she's just made the coat out of Teflon or something. And I thought,
that's a real cop-out.
It is, right? I still, I get that it's Disney. Ultimately, they don't want to...
Well, the earlier Cruella de Vil with Glenn Close, was Disney.
Yeah, I know. But that's the thing, as they get kind of more... Realistic is not the right word, but there's something grittier and something that feels more in your face about the aesthetic and the design here.
Well, actually, I mean, this is a film that... Also, what I didn't like is that it's terribly sentimental. So on the one hand, it wants to be camp and superficial and surfacey, right? And then on the other hand, it turns to mush at the most inappropriate places.
Yeah, right? The family thing.
The family thing. And you can't have both, Yeah.
As in, when I say the family thing, we're talking about the thing where she refers to her criminal friends as her family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, and this is... The thing about the dogs is an example of that. I mean... for Christ's sake, she's meant to be turning into Cruella Devil. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't have, the devil kill a dog. I mean, it's no problem killing a person, but killing a dog, right? It's absurd, right? And it's a real cop-out. And it's also, I think, a real lack of engagement with the material, right? Because I think even And particularly children's stories, they go into very dark places, I mean, think of Bambi or something, right? And also, it's done in a very superficial, aestheticized way. So if you can't turn a dog into a coat in this very heightened, comic thing, then, it's absurd.
The CGI dogs got on my tits a bit. What definitely appeared to me CGI dogs, right?
Well, they certainly didn't look like Dalmatians.
The thing about the Dalmatians in particular is they were really vicious. And from what I understand, Dalmatians are really friendly. Whenever I've met a Dalmatian, it's immediately just headbutted me in my nuts because it was so excited to see me.
Yes.
So they're friendly little... I could buy them as being vicious because they're the villain's dogs. She could have specifically vicious
dogs,
but they don't really. But they don't really they don't say that at least. I would like them to have said, "Well, these are my special Dalmatians that are evil and will kill you."
Yes.
But it wasn't just the Dalmatians; it was the regular dogs as well. The dogs that Cruella and her friends own.
Yes.
They were occasionally CGI. In fact, early on, I think there were a lot CGI, and they didn't. It's not that they looked bad, but you could tell. And there are times when I thought, this is fair enough. Like when you get the Dalmatians running at the camera or doing something vicious, you think there's a certain amount of justification in faking it. But a lot of it was just what happened to training an animal, right? It made me think of Cats and Dogs, which was from about 2000 or so, which was the Jeff Goldblum film. And that was all about cats and dogs living together and having wars. And, it was all real animals that had been shot and then they morphed their mouths so they could speak. And I thought, there was a real charm in doing that. In fact, they had that charm here where you had the young kids, the young English actors who you said, God, they're just like straight out of stage school. Because I said those are the accents that really don't work. Because they're supposed to be these like little Cockney street urchins and they're speaking like they've come from RADA.
Yeah.
That is a certain charm that young British actors have. You go, oh, they're complete shit. I kind of don't mind that in films, right? I thought filming real animals and seeing the problems that you have in filming real animals, getting them to look in the right direction stuff, that has a charm too. And they just they gave up on that.
I thought it goes beyond that because, one of the reasons why actors say never works with animals or dogs is because they steal the show. And they steal the show by being natural. That, you sometimes get Asta in the Thin Man films and, they just do a posture with their body or an expression, right, that just kind of melts you or something. And actually what was interesting with all the dogs that there are in this film, none of them, there was never a moment where you went, "Aw," yeah?
Yeah.
And I'm a real dog lover, right? Like, it doesn't take very much for me to go like, "Aw," at a dog. And there wasn't a single moment of that, and I do think that is because of the CGI. They didn't capture those moments of expression.
I think that's part of it, but also when it wasn't CGI, you didn't when you have that little dog dressed up as the giant rat and they're infiltrating the villain's place. Actually, there was a point of that where you laughed, where the dog jumps at the guard. They had their moments, but there was nothing that was really engaging about those dogs that there should have been.
Yes,
it lacked charm.
I mean, this is a very clunky film, and actually, I think that's something that I want to explore with you because, as I said earlier, it has all the elements that I normally, that would normally thrill me, right? The clothes, the setting, the milieu, actually the stylishness or like sophisticated comedy. It demands to be played in a very heightened, stylized way. I normally like all of that. This had all of those elements, but they didn't really come together. And I'm not clear exactly on why they didn't come together,
There are certain things that the film has to juggle. Like it has the thing about her mum, and there is this kind of lingering thing going on about you never know who her dad is, and so this kind of question about that I think slightly lingers. Her destiny is fashion, you get right from the start when she's drawing and stuff, and so this thing about her wanting to be in the fashion world, that's there. This thing about the necklace, you have to kind of keep track of that, and then the thing about turning into Cruella, and like when she becomes Cruella and starts doing these stunts. At one point I'm going, okay, has she got a label now, or is she selling clothes? Or is she just doing stunts?
Is she schizophrenic? Is she Dr. Jekyll and Miss Hyde?
I never questioned that, but I did think like, is she in business now? Like, what's she doing? But no, she's still working for her villain and doing all this undercover stuff. So there's a lot of various plot points to keep track of, and ultimately I think they essentially sort of cohere, or at least they make sense. They finish.
Well, they don't. I mean, a lot of them seem extraneous. So, for example, that David Bowie-ish guy who owns the boutique. What's the point of that character?
Yeah.
What's the point of all of those scenes, really? I mean, So yes, she gets addressed there. But, this is a recurring character throughout the narrative. I mean, why?
Yeah, well, the reason to bring him in plot-wise is to have him making dresses. Like, that's when you actually see her starting to build a kind of empire of her own. He's running the business, isn't he? There was a shot or two of that.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, look, I'm just saying I saw the shots,
No.
Like, it has a plot function, but it's not a strong plot function.
This is a really long movie in which a lot of the segments of it seem really extraneous.
Yeah, no, I agree. So when I say they cohere, I mean, I think I basically just went back on that as soon as I said it. Like, cohere is not the right word, but they do kind of, every little plot point reaches its conclusion. And you kind of understand.
It has a logic,
they understand
but it's still extraneous.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it could have been cleaner, it could have been narrower, and it does lead to a lack of focus. And the other thing is that it really felt like a natural end to the film when Cruella goes to that fountain, which you've seen her go through the whole film. She wanted to go to this fountain when she was a little girl, and then she goes there and she lost her mum and stuff. She goes back to it, and she talks to the fountain and talks to her previous self. And says, "I still love you, but I'm not you anymore." And it's this long. It's a long take, single shot, and she gets to give this monologue, and that feels like an ending, right? And it's not an ending where everything would have been tied up. Like, had they made that the ending, they would have needed to tie other things up one or two bits. But it felt like an ending. It felt like a real crescendo, and I thought it was great. And then more stuff just keeps happening. And I said to you, like, this should be in the sequel.
Yes, because the film is clearly set up as the first in a cycle of films with Emma Stone taking over from Glenn Close in the role. That's what, you know that's what it's about. So, why cram in so much stuff in the first one, really? You already know the character, you already know the basic feel and milieu and tone and style of, what the film should be like. So it feels like a lot of it is just pointless. And some of it really got on my tits, actually. That huge long Steadicam shot at this very heightened pace where you actually can't see anything through liberties that then ends up with her cleaning toilets. I thought, what the fuck? Why is so much space being, I thought that was just like...
I thought that was funny.
I didn't.
Well,
I thought it was stupid. That's
the whole point, is like she's finally got her dream position, and then you find out she's cleaning floors.
Fair enough, that would be like an interesting, funny thing. But the way that it's done, with a jerky Steadicam, jaggling all over the shot.
Yeah, I do know what you mean about that.
I mean, it was...
Because that wasn't the only shot that had some jaggedy movement to it. And I thought that was odd. Like, but there was a shot where, when you first see Hellman Hall, I think it is, where the villain lives, the camera... It's on a crane, I guess, or a drone. It's going up, it's going over. But it can't be a drone because it's not smooth enough. Because as it goes over this sign or goes up to look at it, cranes up, it's jaggedy. And you think, even in post-production, you could stabilise that. I don't know why that's been allowed to happen.
It's clearly a choice, but I think it's a wrong choice.
I mean, I don't know who would choose that. Like, and what it feels like a mistake more than a choice to me. Or feels like something where they go, that's just how it happened.
I mean, for it to be a mistake and for it to be a choice are not contradictory.
They chose to let the mistake in. but like the mistake, but for me the mistake could be they didn't even think about it, notice it.
I don't know. I mean, it was bizarre. It's a film that feels that more attention has been allotted to pleasurable but trivial aspects of the film, like the bracelets that Emma Thompson wears, and not enough attention has been given to things like tone, and rhythm and structure.
So here's the thing, right? We've basically spent about 15-20 minutes talking about problems with the film, and we started off with the reasons you didn't like it. I did like it. I had a really good time throughout most of this film. And when Emma Stone comes in particular, and you see her face, and you see her hair and her stuff. It's all about her style and the way she's been dressed and the way she's been made up. And I think she completely looks the role as both Estella and Cruella. Forget the acting, forget the accent that you might not like. She looks it. I was really going with it. Part of it is that I don't remember the animated film very well. I mean, hardly at all. I don't remember the live action one with Glenn Close hardly at all, and I've never read the book. So whatever has been changed or adapted or lost or introduced that is lost on me. I'm actually pretty much taking this with just the barest bones of familiarity with the story. So I'm like, I'm fine with this, right? Actually, I'm fine with whatever it's doing with the style that it's creating, and actually it's starting to work for me. I did kind of think, I wonder why, for a film that's being set in London in the 60s, it's got no real relationship to what even I would recognise as the fashion trends of the time. But then I thought, actually, maybe that's okay. Maybe I'll just let it tell its story in its way, you know, kind of let it go.
I thought it was a film that I would like more watching on television in a distracted manner. You know how sometimes... So for example, I thought about this with The Man from U.N.C.L.E. that it didn't quite convince me at the cinema.
Is this the Guy Ritchie one?
Yeah. And then every time I see it on television, I get caught up in it, you know. And, you know, I was thinking, so this film felt a little bit like that to me, that it might be better watching in a slightly distracted fashion on television. And partly it's because, you know, in your head you're absorbed by it and things are not cohering and you're noticing all these mistakes. You're totally focused on it and it's not giving you what your focus requires. It's not good enough, really, for me. What I did think was remarkable, though, was that it's a film that has both the protagonist and the antagonist women, that there's no love story at all. Which is interesting. It would pass the Bechdel test very easily, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And it provides a lot of, you know, really nice comic roles for men. I mean, it doesn't make a big point out of this, yeah? It's just the way that it's chosen it, and it's a very interesting approach to it, I think. And I love the look of it, yeah, and I love the clothes, and, you know, it's a really handsomely mounted film.
Feels expensive.
It feels expensive and imaginative, visually imaginative.
And the soundtrack feels expensive as well.
Yeah, and I didn't like it.
Really?
Yeah. I was thinking they must have spent a fortune on this because, you know, the songs are all classic. It's all like Rolling Stones and...
Yeah, so there's Supertramp...
Judy Garland and
on the
Doris Day and...
On the official soundtrack, there's Supertramp, Bee Gees, The Doors, Nina Simone, Ohio Players, Ike and Tina Turner, Electric Light Orchestra, Queen, Blondie, The Clash, and there's more in the film.
Well, there was definitely Judy Garland and Doris Day as well.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so it's a very expensive soundtrack, but I didn't like the way that it was used.
It all felt really obvious.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hits in there. It's fantastic to hear some of these songs. They're just great to hear, you know, One Way or Another, or A Time of the Season was in there, which is such a classic anthem of that era. But they all feel extremely obviously chosen.
Well, I think the word is kind of Mickey Mousing, when, you know, the soundtrack is just really underlining what the scene is about. And I thought the whole use of songs in this film was a kind of Mickey Mousing. You know, kind of making everything redundant that, you know, the scene itself was already kind of conveying.
Yeah, absolutely. It did convey a tempo and a style, you know, and it conveyed feeling, you know, and some of it is a real shortcut to that. You know, you don't have to put One Way or Another over anything in particular for it to sound as cool as it does. And so, in a way, like, you know, I'm sure they paid a lot of money for that song, and it pays off because it just sounds great. But they haven't actually done anything very interesting with it.
It points to the failures in the film, though, because you hear that one in particular, actually, you know, I'm going to get you. And you're bouncing and excited and, like, you know, your body is responding to it in a way that the film itself doesn't do for you.
No.
So, now, I think the last thing that people said, oh, it's a very queer film and so on. And I went in with the expectation of that. And I came out thinking, well, I don't know what people mean.
Yeah, I thought that.
So yes, it's about fashion, it's about artifice, it's really heightened. In many ways, it's very superficial.
There's an LGBT character who, you don't see him in a relationship with a man or anything like that, but you do get this thing about he gets shit thrown at him and abuse, and that's this line about... There's a kind of plausible deniability actually built into that line where you go, oh, it could just be about the way he's dressed. But it's hinting at, I'm gay, and that's why I get abused.
It's more than... I think it's more than hinting at it. But I also thought, well, what a cliched character in a way, right? Like a camp boutique owner. Big deal. Like, you know, I didn't think any of it was like queer as in transgressive in any way.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
In fact, the most transgressive thing in any of that is the fact that she doesn't have a love interest.
That's right. That's about the only thing.
I was also thinking, because Devil Wears Prada is so at the forefront in my mind when I'm watching this film, and that Meryl Streep performance, I was trying to rack my brains for other opportunities that women have to play characters like Meryl Streep does and Emma Thompson does in this.
And Glenn Close did in the original, because actually I think that kind of performance, I think even Meryl Streep doing an Anna Wintour in The Devil Wears Prada, I think you can find traces of Glenn Close's performance in what was it called?
101 Dalmatians.
101 Dalmatians? Or
yeah.
Is that what her version was called?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But the thing is, clearly either I haven't seen enough films or I'm not bringing the right films to mind. But I was thinking, why is it always fashion? Right? Like, why isn't there an opportunity for women to get these roles outside of that milieu? Why is it fashion where they have to be cutthroat and all this rest of it?
Because fashion is one of the few places where women can be really powerful.
Yeah.
You know.
But can you think of counterexamples? Can you think of other films where you know, or is it always fashion? I know I'm putting you on the spot there, but
this kind of stylized, dominant, powerful, slightly wicked or very wicked in some cases. You know, the only other places that I've seen that this kind of thing is in films set in the Roman Empire. Yeah, Messalina but there the sexuality is obviously much more heightened. Yeah, or actually films about monarchs, the Elizabeth I. Yeah, you see that kind of, it's almost like a kind of a type of performance, where they're both quiet but stylized,
because it is interesting that I noticed this real restraint in Emma Thompson's performance.
Yes.
That despite the fact that it's expressive and it's cartoonish in some senses,
yes. It's very out there, but she's restrained with it.
Right, exactly. Like it's all done through the corners of her lips moving, or the way she pauses on a line, all that kind of stuff. She's not histrionic.
Yes, she's brilliant.
But yeah, maybe other Disney villains have that sometimes, but they wouldn't have certain elements of it.
I think the thing is that it's very rare to have women be as powerful in other areas of society. So, you know, basically it is queens, empresses, you know, or fashion, because, I mean, you know, there aren't women who run steel industries or whatever, you know.
No, but the other thing
there is a wonderful film by Michael Curtiz with Ruth Chatterton where she does play that kind of, you know, owner of all these factories, and she's the big boss, and you know, she's quite ruthless. She's ruthless with her men, right? Like, as soon as they stop making her happy in bed, she ships them off to Montreal. It's like,
That's the other thing I'm thinking. Like, the other thing about it being fashion is that it's where women can fight with other women for power. You know, whereas actually in like the steel mill, whatever it might be, it'll be one woman in a world of men.
Yes.
And here, all the men are underlings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I suppose what's queer about this film is that there's no mention of sex at all. Yeah, I mean, you have a sense of people's sexuality or of people expressing themselves through clothes and makeup and but there's actually very little to do with sex, with the body, with exchanging of fluids. You know?
It is Disney.
Well, I know, but
you know.
Even in Disney, you know, so
because even in Disney, the love stories are essentially sexless.
Well, that's true.
So the only difference here is that there's no love story to be sexless about.
I was just referring to your thing about, you know, where women can be dominant, right? You know, and I think this is a film that really is peopled by women or by men of dubious or unstated or fluid sexuality. And even, you know, the only person who comes across as, let's say, you know, more, you know, masculine or whatever, he is Mark Strong, who's playing the butler. A butler, by definition, is someone who makes himself invisible.
Yeah.
So I thought, anyway.
Although notably, he makes himself visible by coming out and revealing himself to be the keeper of these secrets and going over to Cruella's side and having this unstated and only kind of partially implied father figure thing where he's clearly not the father figure to her, and he never has been, but when he's revealed to have all this information and so on, he does turn into this kind of retroactive protector.
Yes.
So the revelation is that Cruella is the villain's daughter, and this thing about the white and black hair, and when she shows up, she goes, "Do you recognise that hair?" And he goes, "Just a coincidence." And he knows immediately, because he was supposed to kill the kid and never did. So he knows it's her. And obviously you don't know this at the time, but when the revelations ultimately come out at the end of the film, you go back and you go, "Oh, he was protecting her right there and then."
Yes, but okay, so that's like a very good analysis of the story. But my point remains, that the role of a butler is to be there, but to be invisible. So that there's a kind of a closing off or a making invisible, particularly any elements that have to do with like individuality, feeling, sexuality, right? Like, a butler, in fiction is a particular kind of figure. Why does the butler do it? Because nobody suspects it's even there, right? Like, so it's interesting that the most traditionally masculine man in the film is one whose role is that of a butler.
Yeah, but he's like a domestique. He reveals himself at the end, and there's an element of that, I think, because the other thing is that right from the start, he's Mark Strong. Like, Mark Strong isn't a nobody. You know him; he's a recognised actor, and he could be playing just this bit part as a bit of fun or whatever. But it's no huge surprise that he turns out to have this bigger role in the plot.
It isn't. Though I did think at the beginning, he's just financing more stage work.
He could still be doing that even with the slightly expanded role, But there is that. I think I felt deep down that Mark Strong was not going to just be who he's supposed to be for a while. Like, Mark Strong had to have something else to do. I mean, I actually thought right at the start when you meet him in the party, you don't meet him, but you see him talking to the mum in the party. I thought, he's the dad, before you know who he is. So, right from the start, it was kind of niggling at me that what is Mark Strong doing in this? And it doesn't. I'm going to say, it wasn't a huge surprise that he turned out to have a more important role than just the butler.
All right, let's wrap this up because.
Yeah. Well, I did rather like it. I think there are flaws all over the place, and I think there are parts where you can see it's corporate and decided upon. It's very Disney. But I still really liked it. I like Emma Stone. I love Emma Thompson. I really like all the underlings that hang around them. I quite liked the other grifters that she hangs around with. I think it's funnier than you did. I think they really could have tried harder and trained some animals properly. Feels like a crutch. Even though it's not easy to make a CGI dog look realistic and all the rest, like in animating stuff, it feels like a crutch still. Like, they would just do it with a computer. Train an animal to just stop on a mark. You can do it. Dogs are very easily trainable.
This point really got to you.
It annoyed me. It felt like I don't know why it's so hard to train a dog to just stop on a mark. People have been doing it for years. Anyway, you didn't like it.
I think it's a huge disappointment. I found it dull and long, and actually considering what you think the film could have been with all of these elements, it felt a disappointment. And I am disappointed by it.
I sang to you in the car, and I wouldn't have done that without this film, so that's to be recommended.
That is to be recommended. And maybe you could include a little excerpt of it kind of in the podcast.
No, it's just for you, that. Your private performance.
All right, thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website with nearly 300 podcasts now is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Yes. You know, we are one of the oldest podcasts in the Midlands.
Are we?
I don't know.
Domestic. It's not often you hear a Tour de France term in a Crowdville podcast.
No.